My single story. We all have single stories that make the chapters of our lives. We know others perceive us a certain way, make assumptions about us based on what they see, don't see. They think they know us, and thus place us in a single story category that fits a schema. If they err, it's not their fault. After all, they only have their experiences to base their judgment. We do it too. We see others through our own lenses, what we know, what we generalize. Thus, we give them a single story. Is it wrong? Is it right? Or is it just the way it is? It is assignments like these where we need to reflect, dig deep into ourselves, positive or negative, that we can begin to not only understand ourselves but others. Don't judge a book by its cover is a popular saying in American culture, but unfortunately, it is easier said than done. We, I included, make judgments on others every day based on their cover, or our perception of their cover. Thus, we are giving them a single story. My life is full of single stories, some with great outcomes, others not so much, but all needed to make the chapters of my life and develop my full story. My story is not yet complete, and I keep adding stories to my self-amazement and of others. First, there's a single story of my socioeconomic status. I did not have much growing up. By definition, we were considered poor. My father lived paycheck to paycheck. Even then, he sometimes squandered it on drinking and drugs. I distinctly remembered adding up our purchases at the grocery store before going to the cashier, so we would not go over the cash we had with us. As a teenager, I can remember the number of pants, shirts, dresses, and shoes I owned, because there were not many. I remember birthdays and Christmases without gifts and felt lucky we at least had food. Even my relatives, which were not that better off, thought of us as poor, for many reasons beyond economics. When I told my high school counselor I wanted to apply for college, she nicely tried to dissuade me because of her single story of me, a student without economic means. Instead of college, she highlighted my good typing skills and said I should be able to get a receptionist job then move up to a secretarial position. I genuinely think she believed it was a compliment. I'm still a good typist, and I did put myself through undergraduate school as a legal secretary, but my story did not end there, as the high school counselor thought. So I sit here in the comfort of my middle-class two-story home in a gated community with pool, gym, clubhouse, and golf amenities. I wonder about myself as a child and how it could have turned out so different for me, a different story. Then there's a single story of my circumstances. I am the third child out of 5, born to ill, unprepared, unmarried teenage parents. My father only had a 6th-grade education, while my mother was never sent to school. She learned to read at age 15, when my father's sister taught her. My parents had a rocky relationship from the beginning. That included physical and verbal abuse, alcohol, and drugs. Through their tumultuous 10 years together, they produced 5 children. They were on and off during this entire time, until finally, before I was 5, they separated for the last time. I spent my childhood living on and off with relatives, mother, father, or grandmother, sometimes with siblings, sometimes separated, until the age of 16 when I could legally work and somewhat take care of myself. So I set off on my own. The single story of my circumstances is that I might have ended up a high school dropout, pregnant during my teen years, maybe ended up in an abusive relationship or on drugs. But that did not happen. That was not my story. Another story is a single story of my culture. If I am seen through the single story of my culture, I should not be where I am today. In my educational attainment or occupational status, yes, I grew up with the traditional Hispanic values of what the role of a woman should be. It's not that education is not valued in Hispanic culture, but that, at least in my experience, it was not seen as an avenue for women. That was not my place. Being educated was not my story. Instead, a different story existed for me. Subservient wife, homemaker, caregiver. I know it certainly involved making homemade tortillas. One time when I was living with my father and his wife, I needed to go to the library to work on a homework assignment and protested I did not have time to watch younger half-siblings. I tried to explain passing the class was important because it was a requirement for college acceptance. My father got really upset and said something like, "Who do you think you are? You do what I say. You're not going to no bleep bleep college. You'll probably end up like your mother and her sister, pregnant, before you get out of high school." He was speaking from his paradigm, what he knew. Was he trying to prepare me for the future? That was his story for me, not my story for myself. Yet, another single story is that of my ethnicity in the American culture. When I tell someone I am Mexican, they are not really surprised. But then they say you're not a typical Mexican. Again, they have a single story of what Mexican is supposed to be. Or if they are making an unflattering generalizations about Mexicans, they might qualify it with, not speaking about you, of course. You know what I mean. Depending on the situation, I have said, no, I don't know what you mean, and waited for an explanatory response. Other times I knew exactly what they meant and understood that if they were speaking of people like me, it would be done without my presence. When the topic has been brought up that the conversation is about Mexican immigrants and not about Mexican Americans in this country, I politely let them know it is about me, since I was born in Mexico, immigrated to this country at 10 years old, and became a naturalized citizen as an adult. I do have to say, when I was young, there was never a confusion over my ethnicity. I was always Mexican. Was it my clothes, my hair, color, skin color, accent, neighborhood, socioeconomic status, parents' job? What was it? I guess I fit others' schema of a Mexican more than I do now. More single stories. Well, even obtaining a doctoral degree for my ethnicity, gender, and age is a single story. According to other single stories based on any of those factors, I should not be here. Yet I am. Another doctoral student, younger than I, told me when she went to speak to a university representative about entering a doctoral program, she was told she was too old. That single story view did not stop her, and she came to Brandman University. Single stories are dangerous, as Shimamanda Adichie mentioned in her single story video. We are all more than just a single story. Single stories are especially dangerous to vulnerable children who end up believing that single stories imposed on them. As leaders, sharing our single story is important to serve as inspiration to others. Thank you.